Vamos al Futuro. My name is Molly Burns. My Twitter handle is mabfire, and I'm really excited to be here at Drupal GovCon with everyone, kind of kicking off this Monday. As you can see, Abe Lincoln is a little sideways. He's got a little bit of a case of the Mondays, but really excited to be here. This is one of my favorite conferences, and I hope that you guys have a great experience here. And yeah, looking forward to getting started. So thank you guys for coming to this talk. It's a little bit of a different topic than many of the other topics, and this is the first time there's been a community track at GovCon. So I'm really excited to be here and to share some ideas with you guys, and hopefully start a dialogue that we can continue throughout the rest of the conference if you guys are interested to continue to engage. So I want to give a little context to this presentation, sort of some of the nuts and bolts, to give you guys a little grounding into kind of the history of how this came to be. So this presentation actually started as a presentation that I prepared in Spanish. So I gave this presentation in Spanish at several Drupal camps around Latin America. And then I kind of translated it back into English. So it's kind of an interesting opportunity for me to sort of translate my thoughts into one language and then actually translate them back into my native language. And I'm actually using an open source presentation software called Reveal.js. A lot of people ask about that, so I just wanted to kind of get that out of the way, just explain, like many of you guys are probably familiar with it, but it allows you to sort of write your presentations in markup, which is cool. And then, yeah, I'm going to be bringing through kind of a sort of like a mixture of philosophy and kind of practical experience from some of my journeys in the Drupal community, and also some of the things that I've kind of been through in my career that have kind of informed how I look at community and kind of creation of digital spaces. But before we talk about the future, I want to kind of give you guys a little context into the structures that I've been through in my own experience that have kind of informed this, and my experiences with Drupal. So I've been in the Drupal community for about 10 years. I got started in Drupal 4.7, where I was literally, didn't know what it was, and I was using it as a content editor when I worked for a nonprofit, which I'll get into in a little bit. So it's kind of like, what is this Drupal thing? That kind of evolved into a job where I was started to be the content coordinator for a large music platform for Sony Music. So I was uploading all this content to these different artists' music sites, and that was in Drupal 5. And then that transitioned into managing a global platform of rolling out production for all of these artist sites globally. So we would be launching sites in could be up to 30 different languages. So I was kind of managing that process of cultural translation of these different music sites in this platform. And then I moved into project management in Drupal 7. I work at Phase 2 Drupal agency. Kind of moved more from just Drupal to being like overall digital strategy. I've kind of been a part of this process, but in Drupal 7, managing projects. And then now in Drupal 8, I'm really doing more of the digital transformation strategies for organizations. So sort of as I've evolved in my career throughout Drupal, I've kind of seen Drupal evolve and grow and mature into a really robust global community and global system. So I want to go back to the beginning of when I was working in Drupal 4.7. The organization that I was working in was actually called the Rainforest Foundation. And we worked with indigenous communities in rainforested areas to support their claims to land, to protect their rights, to be able to have sovereignty, to be able to protect their cultures, which in turn was actually really beneficial for protecting the rainforest. And it's called rights-based forestry, is kind of the concept behind it, but it's essentially supporting the communities who know the most about the forests to be able to have long-term protection. So I was kind of embedded in this nonprofit that was exposing me to a lot of different ways of thinking about community. And I was also getting introduced to this software that was being developed by community. So I started to observe both of these communities kind of around the same time. And when I say both of these communities, there's lots of different indigenous nations. They all have different variations of how they do things. But there were some commonalities that I noticed in some of the groups we were working with, the tribes, the nations, in the Amazon, about how they made decisions as a community. And I started to notice that there were similar processes in place in the Drupal community, where the whole community was coming together in these digital spaces to actually make decisions about how to drive the software forward and what direction to go in. And I was kind of noticing that there were a lot of parallels between the communal structures that were inherent in some of the indigenous community decision making and in the developer community at Drupal. So it was sort of this kind of like, I was like, wow, there's something here. There's something kind of, I'm noticing this real shift in the way that people are creating things, and it's actually really similar to the way that these communities have been creating things for a long time. And a lot of these themes that I noticed, collaboration was a really big one, working with other people, making sure that all the ideas were being heard, having a space where people could comment. A big part of what we funded from the Rainforest Foundation was actually funding meetings to happen and helping get transportation for people to go to these meetings. So this participation of the group to be able to discuss these long-term decisions that they might be making about their lands and what they wanted to pursue as far as land claims or fighting against an extractive project in their region. And I also noticed similar things when I was observing the Drupal community. That people would make decisions in a group and decide, well, if we make this architecture decision here, what are we going to have to do? Is this going to be backwards compatible? I want to hear from this person. They have an edge case over here. So there really was a lot of this kind of conversation going back and forth, and really also considering the future impacts of the decisions that were being made. So there are also key differences, however. Open source software collaboration, as far as kind of a space and a way of interacting, is really new. Thinking in terms of time scales, we're talking about a blip, right? We're talking about like the internet, and then, oh my gosh, these global communities all talking about how to build it together over the internet. I mean, so really new. And the indigenous communities and their collective structure for group decision making, those have been around for a long time. So they've been really iterating over thousands of years. Hey, what works? What works for the land that we're on? What works for our language? What works for our communities? How can we be sustainable? How can we be thriving? How can we be continuing to engage in the world that we live in? So, there's a lot of commonalities, but I think that the time scales are really interesting. So I just kind of wanted to keep that in mind as we can continue to go forward, is just how fresh and how new and how really kind of transcendent this moment we're in right now with the ways in which we're collaborating really, really are. And we'll talk more about that because it's kind of the central theme here. That we're all connected, whether we're in the Amazon or whether we're here in Drupal GovCon, sharing ideas with folks that are building government websites, right? We are all human beings. We are all here on this planet to achieve or to connect, or depending on what you're motivated to do, right? We're all here having this human experience together, and there's a lot of commonalities in this experience. And one of the things that I feel is common is the desire to be in community and how to negotiate those communities. And the internet communities that we are a part of, they really are a space where we can explore our shared humanity at a whole other level. And these networks that we're using are being developed by people, many of whom are probably in this room, where these spaces for community, these spaces for collaboration are also being designed by us. So there's almost this kind of space creation process that's going on, and this is really all about, at the core, is kind of sharing our humanity and working together. So, you know, this moment, as I mentioned before, so new, right? Like, this is a really key moment for intercultural collaboration. Like, we've never really been in this place before, where someone in Israel can be working on their module and they can get a patch from someone in Mauritius, and they can have a conversation about what the implications of that are in the course of the day. That's pretty phenomenal. And, you know, we have the common tasks that we're doing together and the different languages that we speak, which do provide kind of, there can be some friction there, but there's also a really incredible opportunity for connecting with folks that have different worldviews. So, you know, within a language is inherently a different concept of how the world works. And so we're not just interacting with people that may speak another language, we're literally interacting with other members of humankind who have a different concept of the way the world is structured. And there's a lot of deep possibility there that I feel is possible. And the internet, the web, all this connectivity is really facilitating some of this cultural transformation that we're kind of in the process of right now, and we don't really know what's going to happen. It's all really fresh and it's really exciting. So yeah, it's all happening, and I know that a lot of times for me, I'm in my job and working on the websites and doing the strategy and having conversations, and then I sort of have a conversation with someone who's completely not in this internet world, and they're like, you do what? Open source? What does that even mean? And so I think that taking a minute to just really recognize where we all are as part of being in that nexus of where it really is all happening, and that's a really, really incredible opportunity. And also, it's exciting. Like, we are the people literally here at this conference. This is big stuff. I mean, you know, we're not just building websites. We're helping to create the structures of intercultural communication and translation around the world. And that's really, really powerful. And I just kind of want to go through a couple of exciting examples. I wanted to start with one since we're here at GovCon, and I'm sure there's people in the room that might know even more about some of these open gov and civic technology initiatives. But there's a huge movement happening in global governments to really open up, use data, use open source, share data between governments to be able to make things more efficient. And this example here is Relief Web International, and this is a humanitarian information and news site that's developed and curated by the United Nations, the Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, at the United Nations. And I had an opportunity to work on this project, part of my work at Phase 2, and it was really, really incredible to see that such a small group of a global team, they had a content team in Africa, another content team in Thailand, they had a developer in Japan who happened to be French. I mean, it was like a truly global team, all coming together using open source software to be able to deliver timely, critical information about humanitarian crises around the world. And so they're using open source technology to do that. And this is just one of many examples of how governmental organizations, non-governmental organizations are really taking a lot of the lead in this space. I also want to step back and say that this is not just, about some open source stuff. It's also about like open source technology. It's also about sharing knowledge. So, YouTube is like this platform where there's all of these incredible wealth of knowledge and wisdom. So, this is a screenshot from a Rinpoche from, the Bon Tibetan tradition who, this tradition was almost completely stamped out. And a couple of the people that managed to survive and get out, China at the time when it was being suppressed, are actually sharing the wisdom for everyone on YouTube. And there is a lot of this going on right now. So we have available to us, if we choose to go down the investigations, so much knowledge that's right there. And so many different worldviews are being shared. I also want to talk a little bit here about these young hackers and these kind of life hackers called makers, right? There's a big movement, and I would say that it's definitely all ages that are involved in this, but I think one of the things that's really interesting is seeing kids getting involved in this. And there's this website, DIY.org, where a kid does a project and then they upload the project to share with other kids. Hey, here's how I made this necklace. Here's how I made, this new sprinkler system. Here's how I did this. And people are actually sharing just like ways of actually creating physical objects in the world. And this type of collaboration, this type of sharing is really, really built on and inspired by, I think, some of the earlier kind of open sharing networks we've seen available in the internet. So like the early open source and the early sharing and creating the internet. There's been kind of a vibration set with that, this open web, to kind of allow these platforms to be of existence. Another really incredible example that I want to talk through, this is going to take a little bit longer to lay out, but I think you guys are going to be really interested to hear about it, has to do with the creation of an open source telecom system in Mexico. So in Mexico, I don't know if anyone knows, but there's a really, really big telecom monopoly. And there is a group of villages, indigenous villages, that are in the mountains of Oaxaca. And people in these villages, they live in remote villages, but they wanted cell phones. So they petitioned to the government, to the company, and they said, "Hey, we're ready to subscribe. We want to be customers." And this telecom monopoly, they did a cost-benefit analysis, and they're like, it's going to cost us more to develop the hardware to connect you guys to our network than we will get from subscription. So sorry, you don't get cell phones. And people in the community were like, okay, well, we still want cell phones. So they actually worked with some really innovative telecom developers and strategists and community organizers to petition the government to give them their own frequency. So they actually had permission to create their own network. And they developed this network using open source hardware, open source software, and they actually created this amazing telecom network that connects both their village internally, but then it's also grown to, and I'm not sure the number right now, but I think as of maybe a year and a half ago, it was in 20 villages. And it's this completely innovative network that even allows them to make calls to the U.S. if they have relatives in the U.S. over a combined, VoIP protocol, so they don't have to spend these international calling cards that they have been spending so much money just to call and connect with their relatives abroad. So this is an example of people in a community coming together and realizing that they could make a change, that they could use software, that they could create their own open system to support their community dynamics and to be able to connect with other communities in that region. So they can now talk to multiple villages in isolated mountains. So, I mean, the way that they're set up is one village is here, one village is here. You know, they may actually not be physically that far away, but the way the mountains are, it's really hard to get from one place to the other. So now, these indigenous villages in rural Oaxaca are all connected to each other. And I haven't really had the opportunity to go and visit here, but I'm definitely interested to, but I'm also really curious to see what that impact has made for people being able to be more collaborative and to be able to be sharing more resources. And so, this is, to me, this project is a real example of what's possible. And I definitely encourage folks to check more into this, and I can provide some more details if anyone would like to dig into it a little more. Another example, and kind of coming back to Drupal, is this is a MURKUTU. It's a digital archive for indigenous media. An indigenous group, nation, can get this distribution and actually store their cultural artifacts in a digital way that has the protocols, the cultural protocols, actually built into the CMS. So let's say there's an image of a ceremony that only women are supposed to participate in. If someone from that community logs into the website and they're a man, they won't be able to see those images because those images have been tagged by the elders as this is a women-only ceremony. And we want to make sure that the women can see how to do this ceremony and can watch the video, but this is a women's initiation, and there's reasons why it's for women only. So this kind of cultural protocols are actually built into this distribution using Drupal. And so this is an example of how Drupal's been leveraged to actually start to support indigenous cultures. And definitely check this one out. It's really, really amazing. And it was developed by a real community development process. So they had the product, and then they started to iterate with the people that were using it, saying, which features do you want? What do you want to do? What's working? What's not working? And so this has been multi-year project that's being managed out of a digital center in Berkeley, and they're really committed to being the steward of this product in collaboration with the communities that are using it. In all of these examples, open source is really that key theme. We keep coming back to what's possible when we're sharing from an open way our wisdom, our code, our hardware, the way we're building things in a physical plane. It's all coming from this basic premise of we're better if we share. We're better if we put our ideas out and collaborate and see what can come through, what can come forward. And this is something that, being a part of the Drupal community, is really ingrained in the way that things have been done for a long time. But it's not necessarily something that has been really filtered into the consciousness of a lot of people in this world. And so I encourage folks that are here to really be connected to and also be ambassadors in your lives, in your interactions, with explaining why open source is so powerful and so important. So really, and just to kind of get a little grounding here, to give us a little context of the open source, it's not just Drupal, right? We're here building a Drupal site. We're actually using, in this stack, and people may have different stacks, we're using multiple different open source systems, starting with the server configurations. That is Linux as an open source project for how the kernel software of the computers is running. And then there's, Apache, which is more server configuration, MySQL, which is the database, PHP, which is a coding language, Symfony, a framework, Drupal, a CMS built on top. And then we can even add an open source JavaScript framework that people like. There's so many big ones right now. I don't even know which one is the hot one in the room. React, Elm. I mean, people are really iterating there. So there's so much happening in that last line, right? Like, people are like, JavaScript, what else can we do with it? And that's a place to really look right now if you're interested to see where a lot of innovation is happening. It's really in those JavaScript frameworks where people are layering on top of these other frameworks. So we are the people that are building these structures, and this is an opportunity for us to really challenge some of our assumptions that we're bringing to the table when we're entering into the process of building something. And, those assumptions can even be investigated from the level of the worldview, from the assumptions we're making that are our most baseline assumptions of how the world works. And so I want to walk us through kind of a little bit of a thought experiment to sort of get us thinking from a little bit of a different perspective. And I'm going to sort of ground us in the purpose and then kind of jump in. So I'm really looking for this purpose to sort of allow us to explore a framework of inspiration. And this inspiration framework was developed by an indigenous wisdom keeper. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about him in a minute. But we're going to kind of take a look at this framework, and then hopefully this experience of getting involved in this framework and hearing about it will be able to be inspired to think about what new models of creation we can apply as we move forward to building these digital solutions, and really to have more awareness for the intention and the way we're approaching our work. The thought experiment is grounded in this text called The Way of Inspiration, The Teachings of Joseph Rael. Joseph Rael is an elder, a Tiwa elder from New Mexico. He has written a lot of books. He has done a lot of really interesting life work around peace and peace prayers, and I definitely encourage people to check him out. He has a lot of really amazing teachings. And the language is the Tiwa language, which is a Pueblo language from New Mexico, which is, as you guys know, one of the states that we have in the United States. So this is indigenous wisdom from America. And we're going to go through, the structure of this book is, the whole book is a very short book, but it's really dense. And he counts from 1 to 10 and walks through the process of how an idea comes to be. So we've got, these are all of the numbers from 1 to 10 in Tiwa. And so what I'm going to walk through in this thought experiment is sort of two levels of application. So in his text, he talks about the brain creating an idea. That's the framework. So I'm going to walk through that, but I'm also going to give you guys another layer, which is this concept of a software creator has a new idea, and then that is a product that comes out of an open source product. So there's kind of different layers that this model can be applied to, and so I kind of want to just explore both of those. and have a chance to see how the different ways of thinking of inspiration are conceived of in the Tiwa worldview as brought forward by Joseph Rael, and kind of see what comes up for us as far as applying this to our work. So we start with Wei-mu. This is where the seed of meaning comes in. This is that inspiration. It's that flash. And this piece can be even a little bit mystic for any idea, right? How does an idea just appear, right? It's there. It's like, oh, idea. This inception point, this first flash of something that feels like it might need to be brought forward. So we have this, and then we move into Weisei, which is the duality. And this concept of the duality is where the idea starts to have a dance with a possible solution. So, like, we could see ourselves doing a task. We could see this idea starting to be, okay, like, I think this is going to happen. So, you know, this is when the concept, the idea starts to become actualized because it has a solution to kind of be mirrored back. So the next is paah-nu. So this is where the consciousness gains the power of movement. It sends out messages to the rest of the brain. There's a form that is perceived and a desire to create. And this perception and the desire to create moves forward. So this is sort of when this is like, okay, we've got the idea, we've got a solution, we can see it happening, and we're going to move on it. So there is this movement that is inherent in paah-nu that I think is important. We've got the three, this is the three, right? Like, we're ready to go. We can move. So if you think about this from the context of a software developer having an idea, this is where you're like, all right, this idea is good. I had the flash, had the inspiration, I had the solution that's come to being, and now I'm going to move forward. So now we move into we. This is where all the parts are coming forward to bring forth inspiration. So I would kind of give the sort of the software community level here. This is where you got your team and you're like, hey team, like, or collaborator, do you want to work on this idea? Like, I think I need your help. You do the front end framework, I do the back end. Like, do you want to collaborate on this? It's like, yeah, okay, we want to collaborate. Like, we're deciding to move forward, and now there's been other people that have been brought in. But in the context of the inspiration model that he lays out, this is when that kind of that moving forward is happening within us, right? So we next move into paah-nu. So this is the moment where the idea is understood fully. So it's not until we kind of already brought in all the parts that we can fully understand the idea. Because maybe there's something that we weren't aware of that kind of got brought in by another part once we've agreed to move forward. So this is the point where that idea is kind of coalesced with a group if you're bringing it to that software application level. So this is where we're like, okay, like, we're moving forward. We all get it. We're going to bring in that other piece that this other person brought up, and we're going to add that into the idea. And this is where that idea is being grasped and it's really fleshed out even more. Now, ready to move forward. But maa-tschlay. Maybe we should take a look at the past. Maybe we should review the context around the past, because there could be some keys there that could inform this idea. the information, the memories, the stories, they can provide a context for this idea that can inform how it is created into the world. So from the software standpoint, this would be the time where we're like, with the team, and we're like, okay, does anyone know if there's a module that already exists that does this? Like, maybe we should take a look. Has anyone implemented something similar before? Okay, so this is where we have this real benefit in the open source community, is that we have a really rich context to draw from. It's not just the people in a room that are building something. It's like the people in the room that are building idea plus all of these other people who maybe have also built something like this as well. So it's really important to do this context review and ground in the past, because you want to make sure that what you're building and what your idea is something that can come out of the lessons learned and the stories in the context. So now we move to choh-oh. And this is where all the constituent parts disappear into a devoted state of teachability. And where I've quoted here, those are direct quotes from Joseph Rael. And so the way that he's put this, it's like everything's coalesced into this state of, can this be taught? Can you teach it? Can you explain to someone who wasn't part of this core group what you're doing? Can you explain, can you teach why what you're building is important or needs to be built? Do you have that language? Can you find that language? Do you understand the idea with the past context, with the other input, to actually bring it forward and describe it in a way that you can teach it to other people? So I think that this is a big one for when we're talking about a software project. Like, it's already kind of in the matrix, it's already a little bit cloudy, so really, just the inherent nature of it, like, a lot of people are like, what does that mean, digital? So really, like, learning to distill and being able to describe what you're doing is a really good practice to make sure you have that quality there, and that's really thought through. So next we'll move into waylay, and this is when the brain induces the movement towards the materialization of form. So this is when the idea is actually starting to create into a form. I think one of the things that's really interesting about this in this worldview is not until step 8 that we actually are creating a form. There are so many careful considerations of evolutions of what this idea is and how it's brought together, and looking at the past, making sure it can be taught and explained, all before anything is created in form. And this is where the code is written. This is where the solution is actualized. But it's not until step 8. And so this was the big realization for me when I was reading The Way of Inspiration and like thinking about how it could be applied to open source software. It's like, there's a lot of steps that it might be good to go through before actually committing something and bring that code forward. And I definitely have had experiences where, it's like day one, people are like, we start a project, we're like, when will we see something? When are we starting to build? And I'm like, well, we need to have some discussions first about what we're building. We need to define the requirements. We need to validate the requirements. We need to prioritize the requirements. And so making those steps as part of your process is going to create a real sense of quality and also much higher level solutions. So the next step, we move into we. And this is where we say yes or no to the process because the physical brain deserves compensation. So it's kind of like a way of thinking around that I think is interesting is this is sort of that feedback loop. This is where you've built something and you're like, we need to go back and check it against the original idea. We need to go through that process of circling back to the beginning. We need to review the process that we went through to make sure that what we arrived at is in line with all of those steps that we've already gone through. So it's sort of going through that process, like that process auditing or that process review. I think of this in terms of like a validation, right? If we're thinking of like a ticket, this is like the acceptance criteria that we're going through. Someone's validating like, oh wait, we forgot to link to that other API in the back end as part of a future option of a toggle that we're going to turn on. We should add that in because that was part of an idea that someone brought off the table at some point that we wanted to add in. So this is where we're validating and we're going through that acceptance to make sure that what we've created is connected to that original idea. And then lastly, we're at tehn-ku-ten. This is where the brain shelves the idea for future reference or uses it towards a given act of creation. So this is that moment where the cycle can continue. You can get another idea right away. It's like, oh, we have this great module. This might be the start of a distribution. Or this is great. We feel complete. We're going to file it away in our repository and use it for the next project. So this is that question of, can you amplify the solution into something else right now and restart the cycle, or does it feel complete? So this is that sense of completion. But there is a circular nature inherent in this, in that you can kind of go right back into the cycle. You can go right back to one. If you see what you've completed, like, oh my gosh, brilliant, I got another idea. And then you're all the way back to one. So why did we just walk through this? I think it's important to understand that when we construct software that's connecting people, this is the basis of their interaction. And so every decision that we're making has a lot of impact and potential impact on the people that are using it that we don't even fully understand. So really, like, the care and the thought and the collaboration and the discussion, the validation, all of this is really important. And I think that we can learn so much from other worldviews and other practices of the way communities do things to improve the processes that we're going through in development and internet building. So, an interesting fact is there's about 7,000 known living languages. Now, some of these are probably spoken by 2 or 3 elders currently, and there's a big issue of language loss. But I just want to like really think about that. There's 7,000 known living languages. It's like 7,000 different worldviews that could potentially bring a new framework to the table to allow for a transcendent creation. And each of these languages has an entirely different concept of the world inherent in how their languages are structured. And so just as we interact with people, as we connect with people, just really thinking about that and seeking that out is something that I encourage people to think about. One of the things that in my experience, I just want to touch on a little bit, is I've had the experience and the privilege to be able to travel to a bunch of different camps just like this in other countries. So in Ecuador, and I was able to witness this amazing conversation with Darwin and Stefan talking about semantic web in rural Ecuador, right? I mean, we're bringing people together. That was a big theme of that conference. Everyone in Ecuador wanted to talk about semantic web back in 2013. That was the key topic, right? So, like, that, there's so much interesting things that people are bringing forward. And so, like, in Costa Rica, like, I gave this talk and I was so inspired. There were so many young women in college who were like, I want to get into Drupal. I'm going to be a Drupal developer. That was really different from my experience at camps in the US. So I was like, wow, this is great. There's a whole other generation and more women getting involved, and what kind of stuff are they going to bring to the table? And then Drupal Camp Mexico was another place where I gave this talk, and I was connecting with some of my collaborators, friends in the community, and in this photo, those four guys sort of in that second row, they created Drupal Console, which I don't know if anyone's heard of, but this is a CLI for Drupal that allows debugging, module scaffolding, and it's got 1 million downloads, and it's been developed from a core team in Mexico, and they've offered it to the community, and it's a really incredible tool. So I've had the chance to really see through interpersonal interactions, just connecting and all the amazing things people in this Drupal community are bringing together worldwide. And you know, there's a great keynote, and I think it might be recorded, but Enzo, who's in this picture on the left, he went to, I think it was 50 countries. He went to 50 countries and 50 Drupal camps and traveled all around the world on a Drupal tour to connect with the community. And he found friends in every city through Drupal. And you know, that's really powerful. I don't know a lot of communities that are like that. And so I want to close with, like, when we're talking about challenging worldviews, with the concept of time, right? We're running out of time. Like, we've got to go. Now, this is linear time, right? There are some worldviews that believe that time is actually a circle, that there are multiple time scales, that time is actually not a constant, that everything is happening all at once. So even something as basic that we think is, oh yeah, there's time. Like, that is actually not a given in some of the worldviews, and specifically in the, like, Inca and the Andes, they have a concept of paah-nu, which is like this endless cycle of time. So you know, everything is now. This is our opportunity, and you know, we're in the present moment and at this event. And this is the first day, so I encourage everyone to use this as an opportunity to really connect with people in the community and share ideas and ask them what they're up to, ask them about, you know, what they're working on, why they've come to this event, and really connect, because this is why we're all here, and this is a really exciting time. So just a little plug, if anyone's really adventurous and wants to dive in, come to Drupal Pichu. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be in Cusco, Peru, and this is the second Drupal Pichu. I was at the first one in 2014. It was incredible, and it was a real collaboration of folks from all across Latin America. And so if anyone's ever wanted to go to Peru, this would be a great opportunity. So come check that out. And I want to close with a quote from Davi Kopenawa Yanomami. When I worked at the Rainforest Foundation, we worked with Futukara, the Yanomami organization, and they are, like, in the forest, really deep in the forest. And his point here is that our wisdom isn't useless. It's the wisdom of the earth, which is very important for the survival of humanity. So, you know, look around and be open. So thank you guys so much.